We all learn differently. There has been extensive research done in this field about learning styles, what kind there are, who learns in what way, and how to teach to each style. In this lesson, we will be discussing how to develop and teach information literacy instruction that caters to different learning styles. The second half of the lesson will cover how we can become more aware of our teaching styles. When we get on the road, we all like to do different things in the car. Some of us listen to music, play car games, listen to books on tape, or even just talk. Just like these road trip preferences, there are all types of learner preferences. The next few slides will focus on learning style preferences, how I have catered to them in the past, and suggestions on how you can too. As you can see, there are many types of styles. The two learning styles that we will be focusing on in this lesson is the done and done learning style and the cold learning style. The done and done learning style states that there are 5 different strands of stimuli and 18 elements within those strands that affect the way someone learns. We will take a look at each strand and elements and see how they relate to information literacy instruction. The environmental stimuli includes lighting, seating, sound, and temperature. All of these elements affect the way someone learns. Out of these elements, which ones as librarians can we control or acknowledge? From experience over the years, I make sure to keep the light on during my session in order to keep students awake and to make eye contact. Also, when appropriate, I try to arrange the desks in a U shape to portray a less formal setting. Emotional. The way you can accommodate the emotional strand is easy and requires very little adjusting to what I am sure you are already doing. Learners who are affected by this strand like to have you motivate them by saying encouraging words like great job or that's a good idea. They can also be very receptive to structure and they are task oriented. Sociological. This strand of learning is all about interactions with their classmates and its ability to help them learn. For example, some students prefer to learn alone. You can accommodate these learners by providing them with worksheets to complete or iClicker quizzes. Two other ways to incorporate different learning styles from this strand would be to use group learning activities like the hot seat challenge or peer-to-peer learning like a jigsaw classroom where students teach each other. Physiological. This strand is probably the most familiar to you. It is all about visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile, and how these elements affect the way students learn. In order to meet the auditory learners, the lecture style of our lessons are useful to them. I also meet the tactile learners by having them use the note-taking strategy during the lesson because these types of learners typically like to touch and use their smaller muscles. Visual learning is easily met through your PowerPoint presentations. Psychological. When I start my IL instruction, I provide my students with a brief overview of what they can expect to learn during the session. This slide is a typical example. By giving the students a quick overview, you are teaching to the students who are global learners. They like to get an overview of the whole picture before you break it down for them. Another element within this strand is the analytical learner. They like to learn things through the step-by-step process. So a good example of that would be how I teach primary versus secondary. You first give them the activity. You allow them to analyze the concept, and then you are showing them the step-by-step process. Consider a lesson that you have recently taught. How many of these strands and elements do you think your lesson addressed? As librarians, there are some elements that we will just never be able to teach to. For example, we cannot control the temperature in the room, or the time of the day the class is, or if a student has eaten something before the class started. However, we can be aware of the other strands and elements and do our best to teach those. Now that we are a little more familiar with the done and done model, let's take a look at the Kolb learning style. The done and done model is more about how these 18 elements affect the way someone learns. As you will see in the Kolb model, it is more about the experiences of the learners rather than the elements. There are 4 types of learners in the Kolb model: convergers, accommodators, assimilators, and divergers. People with a converging style like to experiment with new ideas, to simulate, and to work with practical applications. They would best learn in a computer lab where you can give them time to experiment with what was taught. They also like simulated experiences. You might consider role playing. When I am teaching about evaluating websites, sometimes I give the students the scenario that they are editors of a newspaper and they must fact check an article before it gets published. In the past, I have also had students pretend that they are teaching research skills, and it is their job to explain the process simple enough that a little boy could understand. Accommodators adapt themselves to specific immediate circumstances. They are risk takers and enjoy performing tasks. During my sessions, as a way to get students to participate and keep the room active, I usually teach the students something and then ask for a volunteer to demonstrate. This is one way that you can teach to a student who has an accommodating learning preference. Assimilators prefer reading and lectures. They need time to think things through. I am a firm believer that you still need some type of lecture time in an IL session, even if you have some active learning components. People with a diverging style prefer to work in groups, listen, and to receive personal feedback. They also work better in an environment that promotes idea generating. Group work and brainstorming would be a great way to meet the needs of this type of learner. I am sure for those of you who have already been teaching have a nice collection of worksheets that can meet the needs of this type of learner. When I think of this type of learner, it reminds me of the worksheets that I sometimes use for Boolean operators and controlled vocabulary that you see here on the screen. Now that we have a better understanding of learning styles, we are going to move on to another type of style that can affect the way your students learn, and that is your teaching style. Everyone has a teaching style. Even if you have never formally assessed it, it does exist. We are going to be looking at the Grasha teaching style. As you can see in this Wordle, this style consists of 5 types of styles. The personal model approach concentrates on the performance of an academic procedure. This person likes to lead by personal example and demonstrate how something works. Whenever I teach in the classroom, I try to show students actual examples. I don't just stop my search and show the students how to get to the database. I either go live and show them a real search, or I have screenshots of the whole process of what searching through a database would be like, from searching in the search box all the way to dissecting an article for appropriate information. Another example of this is when you have students demonstrate. I do a lot of this in the upper level courses. The facilitator teacher likes to focus on active learning, student-centered activities. Your week 1 lesson plan would be a perfect example of having a facilitator teaching style. The next type of teaching style is a delegator. This is someone who delegates the responsibilities of learning back onto the learners. The delegator then acts as a resource for the students who need help, and this teacher checks up on the student's progress. A perfect example of the delegator style is conducting a jigsaw classroom. Take a look at this worksheet that I have handed out in the past that explains the jigsaw method. Formal authority and expert. Teachers who are comfortable with this method are usually traditional and like to stick to the instructor-centered lectures. This might be the easiest method for us as librarians to consider, since we know in most cases we are only in the classroom for 50 minutes or possibly less to teach the IL session, and we want to make sure the students get to learn everything they need for their assignment. Take a minute and think about these styles and consider what style you mostly practice. In my case, I think I dabble in all of them, but I mainly see myself as a facilitator. Teaching styles versus learning styles. Now that we have a better understanding of learning and teaching styles, you might be thinking, should we match a teaching style with the learning preferences of our students? Or should we formally assess our students to find out what type of learning style they have? I think in the one-shot sessions it should not be done. It might take up too much time. If you are teaching a 4-credit IL course, learning about the student's learning style might be worth your time. Does your teaching style reflect your learning preference? In my case, yes. I am a visual learner. I mostly learn by watching rather than reading or listening. As you might have noticed, most of these video lessons contain a lot of images. Even though my learning preference and teaching style is mostly visual, I made sure to provide you with other alternatives, such as audio, written transcripts, and opportunities to get a better understanding of the topic through activities. In this final week, we will be building upon what we have done in weeks 1 and 2 by creating a lesson plan that encompasses all 3 weeks. Please go to the week 3 assignments for the details. Thank you.